Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we're going to start the Sukkah daf Chaf Beis. We're going to begin on the very top of the Amud by the Mishnah. Sukkah hameduvleles. So we're going to discuss what exactly that word means. Two opinions. The Salasim Rubachamasik Shera. That sukkah which has more shade than sun, as we saw in daf Beis, it's kosher. And then the Mishnah concludes, Hama'uva kimin bias. If let's say the schach is so thick that it's comparable to your house, this is the hint to being able to look through the schach and to be able to see the stars. Unfortunately, a lot of people think if you look through the schach and you can't see the stars, there's not kosher. It's clearly not the case based on the language of this Mishnah. Apparently there is an inyan to be able to see the stars. However, if it's very thick, it's still fine. We'll see that perhaps there isn't measurement that's too thick, that it's no longer kosher. So let's now see the question about this word. Ma meduvleles. What exactly is that referring to? So Amarav sukkaniya, a poor sukkah. In other words, it's dal. It's something which does not have a lot of schach, but still it's kosher. Shmuel Omer kana oil v'kana yared. Here we don't have the schach all on one level. Some are higher, some are lower. And Rashi says, it does create more sun than shade. If, let's say, you would be able to put it all on the same level, so it's a tremendous chiddush. That even though right now it's more sun than shade because there's all these gaps that they're going through the sun on these different angles, but if we would envision that they would be on the same level, then it's fine. So Rav Tani Chada, Shmuel Tani Tarti. So Rav Tani Chada, Sukkah meduvleles, he says one thing. A poor sukkah, my meduvleles, medoldeles, doesn't have a lot of schach, but shisalas mermachamasak shera, just as long as it has enough that it still produces more shade than sun, then it's fine. Shmuel Tani Tarti, my meduvleles, mebulbeles. It's mixed up. In other words, it's on different levels. The Tarti Katani, Sukkah mebulbeles shera. First of all, he's telling us that if you have schach on different levels, it still is okay, and the salas memachamasak shera. As we saw in Rashi, we envision as though it's all on the same level, and then it's fine. Omer Rabbi, Lo Shanu, says Rabbi, the only time, says Rashi, the Shmuel, the Kana Oil, the Kana Yared, Shera, the Amrinan Royan, that we envision as they're all on the same level, even if they're not, is El Shein Ben Zel Zesh Tvachim. It has to be less than 3 Tvachim from one another. Because we know that there's a din of lavud. So if you have schach here, and then a few inches schach here, we say that that's okay. If it's more than 3 tefachim apart, then we no longer apply lavud, they're not on the same level, and therefore since it produces more sun than shade, we will not consider them both on the same level. Even if, let's say, it's more than 3 tefachim apart, the only time we say it's a problem, if the upper level is not at least a tefach wide. Even though they're more than 3 tefachim away from each other, but as long as the top is at least a tefach, then we'll say chavod rami, that we will end up basically lifting up the other schach and saying that they're all on the same level. So it's a tremendous chiddush that even if it's more than 3 tefachim apart, it's still considered to be acceptable, provided that the top is at least a tefach wide. So the Gemara is wondering this whole din of chavod rami. Amar Rabbi minam minalah, minam minalah. Dechi ispe tefach amrin v'chavod rami. Dechi leispe lo amrin v'chavod rami. How do we know that it's all totally on whether or not the top is a tefach, whether we'll say chavod rami or not? It's not, because we learned the Masechtas Oils as follows: Karis habayis. If let's say you have these beams on a house, Valiyah, and on a second floor, she'ein alehen mazev, and there's no plaster on it. Ve'hen mechuvanos, they are equal. In other words, the one beam on one level is exactly like the other, which would be, according to Rav Schlonger's picture, this is about 31 years old, this picture, this is mechuvanos, because the top and the top floor and the bottom floor, these beams are right on top of each other, and there's gaps also the exact same. So what's the din? So tumah tachas achnehen, let's say if tumah underneath one of them, so we say tachta tameh, only the bottom of the stomach. Vein tachtana al yoina. If there's tumah underneath, let's say in the middle, that middle one, so vein hatachtana aliyah, veineim tameh. Al gabi el yoina, if it's on the top, obviously kenegda rekia tameh. Then the tumah goes all the way to the top. So again, what we're basically saying, and it's hard, maybe you can see these pictures, is that if there's tumah, it will stop at that point. It will not continue. But of course, if it's on the top level, it goes, as you can see my little arrow, all the way to the heavens. Now, what if Hayoel Yoinus Kebena Tachtainos? What if instead the top and the bottom, the boards are not on the same level, but where there's board here, there's airspace above. Where there's airspace here, there's a board here, as we'll see in these two other pictures right here. So tumah tachtein, if the tumah is on the bottom, tachas kulan tameh. So we say that the tumah goes all the way for all of it. Al gabein keneged el rekia tameh, and it goes all the way up. V'tani lo b'medibar murim izman sheish behen tefach. That's only when there is a tefach of space. So if there's a tefach of space, we say chavod rami, that this middle floor is going to actually go up. It's as though it's actually up, and therefore it will go up 2 levels. However, if it doesn't have an opening of a tefach, so what do we see? If the top roof those boards are tefach, we say that the bottom level goes up, and therefore if there's tumah on the bottom, it will go up to both floors. If it's less than a tefach, then we say that the tumah will not go up 2 floors, but only go up that 1 floor. So we only say chavod rami if there is a tefach of board, or a tefach of space. However, if let's say that the boards are less than a tefach on the top, so then we will not say chavod rami. Okay. Question 5. Sukkah shesicha b'kana oil v'kana yared v'mitah kach chamasa maruba madina. So we said that a sukkah muvulvelas is kosher, provided that the 2 levels are within 3 tfachim from one another, or even if it's not within 3 tfachim. However, if the top boards are at least a tefach, then we'll say chavod rami, and therefore we say it all is together. Yosef Rav Kahana v'kermel ha'shmaisa samel Rav Ashu Rav Kahana v'chol heicha d'leisvei tefach lo amrina chavod rami. Is that true? If we don't have the top that's at least a tefach, we don't say chavod rami. V'tanya, we learn in Masechtas Eruvin, which is quoted numerous times there. Torah yoytzim v'koisel zeh ve'eno negas v'koisel zeh. So when it comes to a mavoi, as we've said before already in this Masechta, which is surrounded by 3 sides, the 4th to the Rosh Hashanah, so in the race it's okay, but we require a 4th heker, which is either a lechi or a kaira. So if you put a kaira, it's supposed to go from one side to the other. What if you have a beam that does not reach the other wall? Kaira hayoytz mikoisel zeh and negas mikoisel zeh. L'chein shtei kairos achas yoytz mikoisel zeh v'achas yoytz mikoisel zeh. That there, one is here, but there's a gap in between. They don't touch each other, so Tolan Lovud. According to the Tanakama, and up until now, seemingly everyone, the din of a gap of airspace has to be less than 3 that we connect them. However, interestingly enough, as we continue to Chav Beis and Beis, he actually has a different measurement. According to him, he's of the opinion that 4 tefachim is the measurement, not 3. But that's not why we're bringing this down. But we're continuing in this brayso. Let's say you have these 2 beams that are like twins. They're like right next to each other. Each one is not very strong. It's flimsy. And each one on its own is not able to hold a brick. Says Rashi, Hakarish Amru, when we mentioned in Masechtas Eruvin that you're supposed to have a kaira, it needs to be rechava, wide enough, kedei l'kabel ariach, to be able to hold a brick. V'ariach, says Rashi, chatzi levena shel shlosh tefachim. That's half a levena of 3 tefachim. So the question is, if you have both of them one next to each other, so is that acceptable? So if you're able to flip the brick around on its width and it's able to hold them that way, then you don't need a 3rd beam. If you hold it, have it by its length, and therefore you can make a gap between the 2 poles, that's not why we brought this down either. It's for the following reason. Let's say you have 2 of these beams, but they're not on the exact same level horizontally. One's a little higher than the other. We do say the din of royin. We envision the top one like it's below, the bottom like it's above. The top one cannot be more than 20 amos, as we saw already in Daf Beis, because you should go shalta ba'enai. And the bottom one cannot be below 10 tefachim. Now, let's say both of them are within the requisite 20 amos. We will consider them both together. Even this kaira is so small it doesn't have the width of a tefach. So we still say chavod rami, assuming this is also assuming, of course, that they're more than 3 tefachim away from each other. We're assuming that these 2 beams are more than 3 tefachim away from each other, or else it's not a kasha if it's less than 3 tefachim from each other. And the din is that you still say chavod rami, even though it's not a tefach. Similarly, tarat v'mahachi. The top one has to be within 20, and the one below it has to be within 3 tefachim. Inami, the bottom one can't be below 10 tefachim. They must be within 3 tefachim of one another, because they're less than a tefach. But if they are more than 3 tefachim apart, since these kairos don't have the width of a tefach, so it's not a kasha. We're just saying pashut that the din is the same. It has to be within 3 tefachim from one another, because the beams are less than a tefach. If the beam was more than a tefach, you're right, we would say chavod rami even more than 3 tefachim. Okay. This is a very famous Gemara. Hakia dadi psula. Mashma, you need to have more shade than sun. 50-50 is not acceptable. So, we learned in another parak, which is the very beginning of our Masechta on Daf Beis Amud Aleph, Dafka, if the Succah has more sun than shade, is it possible? Mashma, Hakia Dadik Sheres. So how do you understand the 50-50 point? Is 50% shade, 50% sun, kosher or possible? More answers, it depends. Lokasha kan mulmal kan mulmata. Depends if it's above or below. our Mishnah is talking about above. So what does our Mishnah say? Provided that the top is 50-50. If it's not 50-50 above, then it's not good. However, our Mishnah in the beginning of the Masechta is Lamata. That the issue is that the bottom has more sun than shade. If the bottom is 50-50, then it's not a problem. Well, how does that answer the question? Because we know, Omar Papa, Haidami Inchi, Kazuzim El, Ki Istri Molatachas. If you have a small coin on the top, it will produce a different casting of shade and sun on the bottom. We know that the way that shadows and sun work is it spreads out. So therefore, this is the pshat. The schach above must be at least 50-50. That is required. Because if it was less than 50, if the schach above is 50-50, so our Mishnah is saying that it's okay, provided again that it's more. Let me say it one more time. I'm actually getting confused. Our Mishnah says that it has to have more shade than sun for it to be kosher. It has to be more shade than sun. 50-50 is not enough. So it has to be at least 51% on the top. And therefore, if it's more than 50% on the top, it'll be 50% below. So the Mishnah, Daf Beis, that says more sun than shade is possible, means on the bottom. But 50-50 on the bottom is fine, because if it's 50-50 on the bottom, then certainly that means there's more shade than sun on the top. Okay. Ma'uva kimin bias. If it's very, very thick, Tanurabanan, Hama'uva kimin bias, Amo b'shena kachavim nirin, metaychak shera. Even though you can't see the stars, it's still kosher. Ein koich licham nirin metaychak. What if you can't see the sun? Beishami poisim beisil machshirim. So this is the word. The sun we know is a star, and it says over here, koich vecham. The sun is a star. So if you can't see the sunlight, so it's a machlokus whether it is good. Beisil says it's kosher, which is of course how we paskin. I'm going to stop there because we have a new Mishnah. Okay, let's see a couple of questions. Question 6. Sukkah shechamasa ketzilasa madina. Okay, finally I'm going to be able to hopefully explain it properly. What if you have a sukkah in which the shade and the sun is exactly the same? So if it's 50%, lamala bin kana lakana is psul. Lamata, if al haaretz on the ground, 50-50 is kosher. Question 7. Sukkah hama'uva kimin bias madina. If you have a sukkah that's very, very thick, the schach, what's the din? So he says it's kshera. However, im in koich lichamin nir metaycha puted beisham beisil. So ma'achok is beisham and beisil in the situation where you can't even see the sunlight. If you can't see the stars, it's not a problem. If you can't even see the sunlight, that becomes potentially an issue. But again, Beis Hillel says it's still kosher. TA2. Man din sukkah shena kochavim nirin metaycha. What is the din if you can't see the stars? So it's mamish the same questions we just had. Question 7, TA2. When it comes to the stars, it's okay. When it comes to the sun, that actually is a machlokas. TB3. I got this wrong, which is pretty unbelievable. Hasaymech sukkah mitasai. Or samech your bed. Bikarya mitak share. So my time at the Rabbanan, I read it as what's the reason of Rabbi Yehuda. That's why you have to be very careful in these questions. Why do the Rabbanan say that it's kosher? Lo sabri Rabbi Yehuda the place mishum the inlo keva or mitam the mikabel tuma. So this actually it's pretty straightforward. It's just reading it the opposite direction. The reason is Rabbi Yehuda has the issues because ain't no keva. But the Rabbanan hold the sukkah is diras arai, so it doesn't have to be keva. And according to the reason of its makabel tumah, the Rabbanan hold that the rak sichoch also makabel tumah. Only the issue is the schach. Lo defanois hamaymin l'schach. Not the walls that hold up the schach. The walls that hold up the schach, that, according to the Rabbanan, is not an issue if those walls are mekabel tumah. Ad kan.